So it's been a bit over a year since I released my big 30-minute video on Black Mesa, and since then, quite a lot's changed. Before we get to that though, a lot of this video won't make much sense if you haven't watched that, so I'll link it down below. If you don't care, you can skip to this timecode where I start talking about the mods. The first thing I'll go over here is the Definitive Edition update. Honestly, it's a big improvement, cutting down on tedium in places, sprucing up some sections, and the major changes to power-up really set it apart. I'd love to see something similar modded into the original game someday. However, it doesn't really fix any of my bigger issues. I still find that the combat, pacing, and visuals of the game just aren't up to par with either the main Half-Life series or often even with the original game. The big thing I really wanted to get across in my first video was that this game is not good enough in every aspect to warrant playing it in place of Half-Life. I wish I would have hammered that point in further, because at times it kinda comes off like I'm saying Black Mesa is a bad game in general, which it certainly isn't. If I were to put a score on it, it's probably somewhere around a 7 or 8 out of 10, whereas the original is closer to a 9. And as for combat specifically, no, the game isn't too hard. In fact, most of the aliens are a hell of a lot easier, but a lot of the game's difficulty doesn't progress in a natural way. I harped on the soldier combat in particular, because a lot of what they've done in We've Got Hostiles and Surface Tension is essentially reuse the same combat areas from Half-Life, and sometimes make them bigger and fill them with more soldiers, but the combat flows completely differently. I wish I'd thought of this comparison at the time, but imagine if Doom 2016 played exactly the same, the enemies were all fast and jumping around and all that stuff, but every arena was just a slightly updated room from Doom 1. Actually, you don't have to imagine. These are Easter eggs you can go play right now to get a feel of how bad that would be for an entire game. On the visual side, my main issue was, and still is, that they're trying to make it look like every AAA game from the last 10 years. I remember when that Half-Life Alyx trailer came out with this gnome-faced son of a bitch, and that was great. The Half-Life series doesn't need to be photorealistic. It doesn't need objects literally everywhere an object could possibly be. It doesn't need aliens that look like something out of the pre-fun Marvel movies where they were trying so desperately to make people take these silly monsters seriously. Even the Definitive Edition felt the need to add these hideous shrubs everywhere. At the end of the day, I think Black Mesa's problems come down to a lack of a shared, cohesive vision, partially because the game had a team shifting in and out for 2 decades during development. Some people clearly wanted to make a prequel to Half-Life 2, and to me, that's as ridiculous as trying to spin The Hobbit into an overblown Lord of the Rings prequel. But at the same time, there are people on here like the writers and voice actors who seem to stick entirely too close to the original, making a good chunk of the NPCs here feel out of place.
Ah, Gordon, there you are.
Nice of you to finally join us, Doctor.
We've just sent the sample down to the test chamber.
We've boosted the anti-mass spectrometer to 105%. Bit of a gamble, but we needed the extra resolution.
All that said though, there's obviously a lot of talent here, and I'm genuinely excited to see what Crowbar Collective does in the future. With an original IP, I think they could make a fantastic game, whether it's something I'm personally interested in or not. Oh, and to those who've commented that I'm just blinded by nostalgia, I admit that's kind of true to a degree. There's a part of me that just loves the first Half-Life to death, but I do believe that it has worth as a singular piece of media on its own. I was kind of spurred on to make the video when I saw Nero's review of Black Mesa, the guy behind this excellent critique of Majora's Mask 3D, specifically the part where he says,
"Balancing all of its faults and strengths, Black Mesa is the slightly better playing version of the game."
It kinda just made me want to point out that no, there are real reasons to prefer the original game over this remake, and encourage people to look past some of the dated graphics to see them. But now my video has more views than his, and he made this horrible blunder.
The flashlight no longer drains your energy when used, highlighting just how bad an idea it was to tie visibility to your health in the first place.
So it's safe to say that I'm objectively correct in every conceivable way. The Definitive Edition certainly makes it a better game, but I still agree with most of what I said in the video. However, the Definitive Edition also fixed a ton of issues with mod support, and with this, I've been able to get a lot closer to the experience I personally want out of a Half-Life remake. You can find all of my recommended mods in a link below, but watch the rest of this video before installing all these, because there's more setup you'll need to do to get these working properly. I've curated all of these to avoid any conflicts, which has led to a few mods I otherwise would have included getting the shaft. First of all, go download the Hazard Course mod. We'll talk about it later, but it's important that it's installed. Then, download Junice's Classic Weapon Pack, because it's fantastic, and I like them so much that I didn't bother removing them when recording footage of the unmodified game for that first section. Next up is the Black Mesa character expansion, and this is the one that'll cause you the most trouble, but is required for so many of the other mods here. It adds a whole bunch of extra NPC models, or model pieces, or however Black Mesa's NPC generation works, in order to flesh out the environment. You get engineers and hazmat scientists and these guys in normal office attire, just a lot of stuff like that to really add some much needed variety. To install this properly for the mods we're going to be looking at, you have to go to the Steam page and use the Google Drive links. Download the main files, as well as either the BMCE HECU pack or Romka's Classic HECU pack. Personally, I chose the former, but you can't go wrong either way. Don't get the default HECU pack, because that won't work properly in some of the other mods we're going to talk about. You'll also have to follow this pack to get to the Hazard Course mod in your files, and delete the VPK files beginning with hcourse_misc_. That way, you won't run into any conflicts, but you'll get the enhanced NPCs in that mod as well. Install the files you've downloaded by extracting them from the zip folders to your Black Mesa custom folder, and if you don't have that, just make a folder in this directory called custom and it'll work fine. Now we can move on to the chapter overhaul mods made by Blooper Eel and Citizen Quinted? Fived? You know, they did the same thing for Half-Life 2, and nobody calls that Half-Life Squared, so I'll say Citizen 5. These are the big ones, and all of them require the character expansion mod. They change a lot of small things, rebalance things slightly, add a lot of tweaks to their respective chapters that improve them a great amount. Stuff like adding the light switch back to that one room in Anomalous Materials, unlocking this door in Unforeseen Consequences. It adds in the vents and We've Got Hostiles, and quite a bit more. I've also added Inbound Revamped, Zen Staff Overhaul, and probably the most important mod, the most definitive On a Rail mod. This combines On a Rail Uncut by Text Fam Guy, as well as the On a Rail Loop mod by RK, and it adds in all the character expansion NPCs. This is currently the best way to improve Black Mesa's On a Rail in my opinion, although it doesn't do anything about the piss fog covering every map. A mod that does, which I very nearly included instead of all these chapter overhauls, is BMS Classic, which does something similar in a single package, but I found some of those changes to be too much. There's a lot of added enemies, and I like the challenge that brings, but overall, the chapter overhaul mods won over by a tiny bit. If BMSC was compatible with the definitive On a Rail mods though, I think I would have had to give them a tie. The lighting in their version is just absolutely perfect, seriously. I've also included a few small mods that make the game feel more like the original, like Braindead's Classic Aliens, Old Hermit's Classic Ammo Boxes, Classic Sound Effects, Pale Nihilith, and a few more. There's also this mod that removes the ugly-ass paper textures just thrown all around the game, and I would have included this mod that adds more monitors, if not for the fact that it conflicts with Further Data, a fantastic remake of the Uplink demo in Black Mesa by Chris Bryant. But rather than remaking the maps exactly, it's gone through and completely redone every area. I hesitate to even call it a remake, it's more like an adaptation of Uplink in the style of Black Mesa. It's pretty much exactly what I wanted out of Black Mesa itself. Chris Bryant is also part of PSR Digital, the team behind the Hazard Course mod, which does the same thing as Further Data but for Half-Life's tutorial.
I could just radio for backup if you keep this up.
Honestly, not only would I consider Black Mesa incomplete without these two mods, I actually have a lot more fun in them than I do in Black Mesa itself. Oh, and PSR Digital is working on a remake of Decay in the Source engine, which looks fantastic, and Chris is part of Tripmine Studios, the people making full Source remakes of Opposing Force and Blue Shift, so I have high hopes for those too. Oh, and speaking of Blue Shift, there's a separate remake for that as a mod for Black Mesa in the works, though I haven't included it because I'd like to wait until it's done. They have the first 3 chapters out though, so give them a shot if you're interested. And when it comes to non-remake custom content, there's a lot of high quality stuff on the workshop, but I've picked out a few of my favorites to add to this collection. To get to these custom maps, select the workshop tab on the main menu and you get a nice little list of them all. The rest of the mods I've included here are just a lot of little tweaks that I personally enjoy. Aggressive HEV zombies, glowing Vortigaunt murals, that caliber of extremely minute change that just makes me feel happy.
Oh man! Dinosaurs are reptiles! They must be cold-blooded! Now you listen and you listen good. Birds are one of the closest living relatives to dinosaurs we have. And I don't need to tell you that they're all warm-blooded.
And that's it. I can't guarantee that these mods will be compatible with pretty much any others. They certainly won't work with mods that alter any of the maps reworked across these chapter overhaul mods, which is most of them, but that's kinda just what happens when you start modding single-player games like this. I'd love to see something done about the weird orange fog and questionable ethics as well, but you have to take what you can get. I want to thank everyone working on these mods for their work, and Crowbar Collective for making all this happen. This game has become a far more open platform for maps set in Black Mesa than Valve has ever provided, and I'm excited to keep checking back in to see what else the community comes up with. And thank you all very much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, you can do all that stuff. You can also join my Discord server and talk to me and other people. There's a wonderful world out there we have on the internet.
You're living in the past. That experiment is single-handedly responsible for inspiring my career in science.
How much recognition do you think you're going to get for reproduction, though?
You should focus on Hello. inventing new and unique.
He